It's the world's biggest passenger jet, pride of the Qantas fleet. One of the most complex machines ever built. So clever, it can almost fly itself. So, what can possibly go wrong?
Within about 5 seconds, it felt as if we were plunging out of the sky.
The unthinkable is happening.
There were two loud noises.
Boom, boom.
His number 2 engine was exploding into pieces.
Engine 2 failed. Wing slats failed. Left ailerons failed.
We're coming too fast, we're coming too fast.
And I thought, this is not good.
This was a life or death situation.
Changi Airport, Singapore.
The conditions were perfect to go flying.
Captain Richard de Crespigny and his team are about to fly Qantas Flight 32 on the second leg of its journey from London to Sydney.
I'm leaving family, I'm leaving my sisters there.
Rosemary and Larry Hegarty on their way home to Australia after a holiday in Ireland.
But then my family here, my boys and my husband are here, so it's always a great pull for me as to where I want to be.
Their plane is an Airbus A380, 500 tonnes of advanced materials and electronics. 4 engines, 2 decks, more than 500 seats. The biggest passenger plane ever to fly. The first Super Jumbo.
It is the latest technology. It's the derivation of 100 years of aviation.
At the time, there are 39 A380s in service around the world. Qantas has 5 of them. This aircraft was the first one Qantas had taken delivery of and was named in honour of the Australian aviation pioneer Nancy Bird Walton. Despite its size, it only needs 3 human flight crew. Because at the heart of the A380 is an all-powerful computer system which does all the flying for them. Alongside Captain Richard de Crespigny is co-pilot Matt Hicks. Behind them, Second Officer Mark Johnson. But unusually, there are 2 other pilots on this flight. Harry Wubbin and Dave Evans are check captains. Their job is to review the performance of the crew. Today, these 2 check captains may make the difference between life and death for 469 people.
Before we took off, he said to me, happy? Everyone happy? I said, yep, just don't crash.
Qantas Flight 32 lifts off from Changi Airport just before 10 a.m.
I'm totally relaxed because I loved flying.
Everything is running smoothly on the Whisper Quiet megajet as it climbs into the skies above Singapore. Five minutes later, as it reaches 7,000 feet,
There were 2 loud noises. It was like
Boom, boom. And I can remember seeing this flash of white come off the inner engine.
And I just looked at Larry and I said, do you think we're going to be all right?
The next thing I did was just say a couple of quick prayers. And the whole plane started to vibrate.
Captain de Crespigny's first reaction is to reduce power.
I immediately went to level the aircraft, which would serve to bring the thrust off the engines and to make everything less severe.
At the same time, the plane's computer system is telling them number 2 engine is on fire. De Crespigny tries to set off its remote-controlled fire extinguishers, but gets no response. Then number 2 engine cuts out completely.
Engine 2, fail.
Losing 1 engine out of 4 is a problem, but it shouldn't be a catastrophe. The plane's computerised flying system is programmed to manage just such a situation.
There was a girl sitting on the aisle seat opposite me, and she had a little baby. And she looked at me and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I think something's happened, one of the engines, but it's all right, we've got 3 other engines."
But single engine failure suddenly turns into something much worse.
Wing slats failed, left ailerons failed.
In just 1 minute, the system's reporting a cascade of over 50 different error messages.
Fuel system and flight controls,
Hydraulics at low pressure.
landing gear, brakes, air conditioning.
And now the problem with number 2 engine starts spreading.
Engine 1 in degraded mode.
What I wasn't expecting to see was 2 other engines in less than normal condition.
Engines 1 and 4 are still working, but the computer system is warning the pilots it can no longer fully control them.
When you get a systems failure with an aircraft as sophisticated as the A380, if it's a big systems failure, the computer starts telling you everything that's wrong. And in the case of the Qantas flight, there were an awful lot of things that were suddenly wrong.
Qantas Flight 32 is now in deep trouble. It's becoming clear the explosion has caused a massive failure of the A380's onboard computer system, and that means the plane can become virtually unflyable. 469 lives now hang in the balance in a battle of man over machine. Qantas Flight 32 is in a world of trouble. An explosion has already taken out 1 engine. Now the onboard computer system, which the pilots rely on to fly the plane, has suffered a massive failure. One of the worst things that can happen to an aircraft, and recent history has shown just how disastrous that can be. 2 years earlier, over the south of France, an Air New Zealand Airbus A320 has been on lease to a German airline. It's now on a short test flight before being handed back to its owner. On board are 2 pilots from XL Airways, an Air New Zealand rep, and 4 other New Zealand officials. Just like its bigger cousin, the A380, the A320 is flown by highly sophisticated computerised systems. As part of the handover procedure, the crew need to test one of the most important functions, the stall protection. The A320 is designed never to stall. If its computer systems detect the plane is flying too slowly, they should automatically tilt the plane's nose downwards, power up the engines and accelerate out of the stall.
That's the pitch.
Pilot Keipel starts the test.
The quickest way to stall an aeroplane is to slow it down and to point the nose up.
It's a tricky bit of flying.
Deliberately stalling an aeroplane is not kid stuff.
This is a potentially dangerous test normally carried out at 14,000 feet. But as the crew are heading back down towards the airport, they decide to do the test at just 4,000 feet.
We're still reducing the speed. Golf Lima 888 Tango.
As the nose comes up, pilot Keipel expects the computer system to take control.
The crew was just waiting for the protections to trigger.
The speed continues to drop. The plane gets slower and slower. But still, the computer system does nothing.
Don't sink.
Then the plane starts to stall.
Don't sink.
The stick shaker goes off. The plane swings violently left and right.
Don't sink.
The captain immediately applied full thrust and gave a little bit of nose-down input on the stick.
The extra power from the engines should pull the A320 out of the stall. The nose does start to tilt down. But then it stops.
The aircraft is not responding the way it ought to.
Suddenly, the nose starts soaring up again.
It's pitching up all the time.
The aircraft is now pitching up at a frightening angle.
Should I increase our airspeed?
The plane's stalling again.
The airplane runs out of lift.
It's out of control.
Don't sink. Don't sink.
It flips over, then plummets nose down.
3. Pull up.
At 4,000 feet, the pilot has no time to recover.
Caution. Terrain.
The plane simply runs out of sky.
Terrain. Caution. Terrain.
The A320 plunges into the Mediterranean, killing everyone on board. An investigation into the crash reveals 2 small sensors linked to the plane's computer had frozen, telling the onboard system the plane was flying level when it wasn't. The A320 scenario highlights just how perilous the situation is for Qantas Flight 32 in the skies over Singapore. The pilots are facing something much worse than a faulty sensor.
Engine 2, fail.
Since a huge explosion, they're suffering failure after failure.
Wing slats failed, left ailerons failed.
Just 6 minutes after takeoff, they have 1 engine dead, 2 others only working manually.
Engine 1, integrated mode.
The computer's bringing up an endless stream of warnings.
Engine 4, degraded mode.
The warnings start to contradict each other. The crew now realise their worst fear. The all-powerful computer system can no longer control the plane. November 4, 2010. Minutes after taking off from Changi Airport in Singapore, Qantas Flight 32 is in grave danger. An explosion in the number 2 engine has had a catastrophic effect on the plane's computer system.
I had my thumb up most of the time, just cancelling the bells. You can't think with a bell ringing on top of your head.
The crew struggle to understand what's going on. None of them have trained for total systems failure.
Individually, everything was manageable, but we don't necessarily practice everything at once.
Wing slats failure.
Without the computer system to help them, the plane's almost unflyable. There's a danger the 3-man crew will be overwhelmed. But luckily, right behind them, they have two of Qantas's most experienced captains, Dave Evans and Harry Wubben, who were on board to check the crew's performance. The 5 pilots divide up the tasks between them. Richard de Crespigny focuses on actually flying the plane. The first officer reads out the error messages.
Landing gear control and indicator warnings.
Then he and the second officer respond to them. In the chaos of confusing messages, the experience of the 2 extra captains is crucial. They help the crew take the decisions which the system can't.
I do apologise, Hayes.
Where we have a technical issue with our number 2 engine, we have dealt with the situation. At this stage, everything is secure. The aircraft is flying safely.
Richard de Crespigny realises he has to get the plane down on the ground as quickly as possible. The pilots agree their best hope is to head back to Changi Airport.
We just turned left and went up towards the north, back towards the field.
But they're flying the world's biggest plane. It's badly damaged and still full of fuel. That means they'll have to land fast and overweight. The danger is they'll go off the runway. So they try to calculate their chances of landing at Changi Airport using data from the onboard computer.
With the amount of failures, it was unable to make a calculation.
The computer can't cope. They try another approach.
So the computer really can't calculate what the pilots need because it's such an abnormal situation. There's been so much damage to the airplane that the numbers essentially aren't making any sense. So the crew puts in a contingency plan.
And come up with just the slimmest of margins.
We had a 4-kilometre runway. We had 3,900 metres that we would need. We had 100 metres surplus.
But it's only a best guess. If they're right, the landing's going to be incredibly tight. If not, it could be a catastrophe.
Aircraft don't travel over rough ground. If it goes off the end of the runway, then you're looking at the risk of fuselage breakup, fuel leak, fire. Write your own scenario in terms of how bad it could be.
Even getting the plane onto the runway is going to be a huge challenge. With the computer system overwhelmed, they've lost many of the controls they need to steer the A380. The Qantas pilots are facing challenges that have had disastrous consequences in other incidents. 20 years earlier, a crew coming into land in Sioux City, Iowa, had to deal with a similar crisis. Denver, Colorado. United Airlines DC-10 is preparing to take off for Chicago. The crew have no idea that this flight will turn them into aviation heroes. Al Haynes is captain of Flight 232.
Okay, starting checklist. Battery switch. Check.
Bill Records, first officer.
The weather was good. The flight was anticipated to be normal.
Standby power selector. Check.
Dudley Dvorak, flight engineer.
Hydraulic system.
Hydraulic system good.
And Jan Brown, the first flight attendant, is looking after the 285 passengers, including 52 children, on a special Children's Day promotion.
Thank you, Tara. Have a good day. Okay, gentlemen, here we go.
Just after 2 p.m, Flight 232 begins its 2-hour journey to Chicago.
Engaging autopilot. It's all yours, Bill. Should be a smooth ride.
We're in cruise, and nice smooth flight, everything's going fine. We've been airborne about an hour.
Well, it was one of those extraordinarily beautiful July days. Things were going smoothly. I had expedited the service because Al had said that we might have a little turbulence before we arrived in Chicago. And so I wanted to have everything, the service cleared up in case we had to sit down.
At 3:16 p.m, the pilots make a shallow right turn.
I was in the economy section picking up trays. Went out of the blue.
Suddenly, the tail-mounted engine explodes.
It started literally with a bang, shook the airplane and vibrated the instrument panel.
We have to determine what's wrong.
Knowing that people always look at us to see what's wrong, I just kept my game face on. I see a woman holding a small boy on her lap. So I immediately go to her and I, in a very calm voice, told her, "Are you okay? We'll be all right."
Number 2's gone.
Just like on Qantas Flight 32, losing one engine out of 3 shouldn't be a problem.
You just shut the engine down and go on with your flight.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We hear the cockpit announcing that we've lost an engine, and we still have 2 engines. We'll be all right.
Then, the plane starts to bank steeply to the right. They try to correct it, but it doesn't work.
Bank angle, bank angle, bank angle, bank angle.
The pilots now realise they're facing much more than single engine failure.
System 1, 0 pressure. Engine 2 on fire.
I've got it, Bill.
System 2, 0 pressure. System 3, 10%.
The exploding engine has cut through the hydraulic lines.
No. Make that 0%, 2. We've lost all hydraulics.
Just like on Qantas Flight 32, they've lost the controls they need to fly the plane. A situation they haven't trained for because no one thought it could ever happen. Qantas Flight 32, with 469 people on board, is crippled over the skies of Singapore. The pilots are facing a systems failure on a scale few could have imagined. But the crew of United Flight 232 don't have to imagine it. They are living it. They've basically lost control of their aircraft on a flight from Denver to Chicago.
232, we just lost number 2 and some hydraulics. Airplane is emergently controllable here.
We've been told that this cannot happen. This is an impossibility because of the way that the airplane is designed. It took us a while to realize we have nothing. All we had were the throttles, the power. And that's something we don't train for, so we don't really know how to handle that.
Somehow, they have to find a way to manoeuvre the plane using the only control they have left, the throttles, which control the thrust from the 2 remaining engines.
We're not told how to fly the airplane without hydraulics because you can't lose them. So you never practice it, you never drill it. It was completely foreign to us.
At this stage, Jan Brown believes there is only a minor problem.
I think it was Dudley telling me to come to the cockpit.
We've lost all hydraulics.
He's now telling me that we've lost all hydraulics and that I should secure the cabin and brief the passengers. And the situation is such that we could go straight down. And there's nothing that can strike more terror, and I've never found the adequate word, petrified, terrorized, terrified, that this is a life or death situation. And I'm just hit with the enormity of the crisis. It just made my blood run cold. And my first thought is, oh, please, God, let me be someplace else.
Jan is sent to reassure the passengers.
My mind is working, that I have to be calm, my crew has to be calm, we have to keep the passengers calm. I was very concerned when I pick up the first tray after I've come out of the cockpit, and my hand was shaking.
Meanwhile, Captain Haynes and First Officer Bill Records are struggling with their improvised steering.
We just can't do all of that. There's just too much to do.
What they need is another pair of hands. And just like Qantas Flight 32, the crew gets a lucky break. One of the passengers, Denny Fitch, is a DC-10 instructor.
Comes up, introduces himself, and asks what he can do to help.
The four crewmen divide out the tasks.
Now he's standing between Bill and myself and operating one hand on each throttle. If we had to turn left, one of us, either Bill and I, would say left, and we'd turn the control wheel to the left, and Denny would push the throttle up to the right to bring that wing up and help us turn.
Easy, easy. Now some right. A bit more.
It takes pinpoint accuracy and every ounce of concentration.
We're not thinking about crashing, we're not thinking about burning, we're not thinking about how we're going to do when we get close to the ground. The main thing is take one step at a time.
Okay, now some right.
Gradually, they bring the plane back under control. The question is, can they land?
Now we just have to find a place to try and put it down.
By now, they're flying over the state of Iowa.
They tell us Sioux City. So, okay, that's fine with us. Take us to Sioux City, because we'll go there. It's got a runway long enough to land.
We had to lose 37,000 feet of altitude from where the incident took place. So I remember looking out the window at one time and thinking it's a long ways down.
A bit more right.
The crew now steel themselves for landing. They all know it could be fatal.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be trying to land shortly. I have to warn you that it will be very firm.
There are four very young children sitting on their mothers' laps. They don't have their own seats.
While we are waiting for the cockpit to give us the brace position, I get on the microphone and direct passengers with lap children to place them on the floor and hold them. I'm saying this and I'm thinking to myself, this has to be the most ludicrous thing I've ever said in my life. What sounds good in a training class does not sound rational in real life.
When we were approaching final, I was feeling both relief and quite a bit of apprehension at the same time. Wondering how it was going to end up, knowing that we had no brakes to stop the airplane and no controls to keep it on the runway. A little left bank. We were descending way too fast.
You're cleared to land on any runway. You want to be particular and make it a runway, huh?
We're trying to hit Iowa, safely hit Iowa, and he wants us to land on a particular runway. And we thought, well, that's kind of pushing it then. We're going too fast.
Pull the power back, all the way back, the left one. Pull it back.
I'm asking Denny to pull the throttles back, and he says he can't because that's making us turn.
Or left. Pull left now.
I can barely see we're close to the ground. And just hoping that everything will come out right.
Right engine rolled us to the right.
Pull the throttle back, left.
I said left, left,
Left.
left throttle,
Left.
left, left, left.
Pull the power back, left-hand side.
Left.
Pull the power back. Pull it back.
The airplane started rolling to the right.
And then we smash into the earth. And I just blacked out.
Flight 232 finally comes to a halt in a field alongside the runway.
I can hear Bill talking to Denny, and I can hear Dudley, and there's no other sound. It's completely quiet.
The 4 crew in the cockpit survive. So does Jan Brown. But out of the 296 people on board, 111 perish.
I look in front of me, and here comes the mother of this 22-month-old boy. And she says, I have to go back and get my son. And she looks up at me and she says, you told me that it would be all right. And he's gone. I'm thinking, I'm going to live with this the rest of my life.
Incredibly, there are 185 survivors. But for QF32, the danger is far from over. Somehow, Captain de Crepney and his crew have to land the world's largest passenger jet, rendered virtually unflyable by a massive computer failure. Qantas Flight 32 from Singapore to Sydney prepares for an emergency landing at Changi Airport.
Engine 1 integrated mode.
The plane's computer system is in meltdown. They have lost almost all the flight controls. Yet somehow the crew have to find a way of bringing the giant Airbus A380 down safely. 469 lives on board are at risk.
I thought about my wife and kids for a while. So I better do a decent job here, otherwise I'm not coming home.
Captain Richard de Crepney and the 4 other pilots can barely steer the aircraft.
And when the engines exploded, the debris from that engine has gone through the wing. It's severed electrical lines, it's severed hydraulic lines. So to lose those systems is quite critical as to how much control the crew can exercise over the airplane.
Worse still, it's full of fuel. It's 50 tonnes heavier than its safe landing weight.
I had to be as gentle with the aircraft as I could.
Being gentle is incredibly difficult. Normally, the computer system controls the plane. But without it, it's hard to correct the slightest roll to left or right. And damaged wing slats make it difficult to slow the plane down for landing. controlling the airspeed is going to be an immense challenge. So Captain Richard de Crespigny adopts the same solution as the pilots on the United Airlines flight. He's going to use his engine throttles to manoeuvre. Number 2 engine is dead, but he still has limited thrust from numbers 1 and 4. So he sets them at equal power. This should stop the plane from rolling left or right. To control the plane's speed, he's going to use number 3 engine, the only one he can fully trust.
My whole concentration was the runway and the speed, so I just had to make sure we flew exactly on that approach speed.
We couldn't be fast. If we came in fast, we'd overrun. We couldn't be slow, otherwise you'd just drop out of the sky.
The difference between stalling and hurtling off the end of the runway is just a few knots.
It's not a margin that you would ever want to fly in normal operations.
I told him the speed was critical, that he had to maintain the speed, which he knew.
And I thought, well, thanks, Harry, that's an understatement.
I do apologise, ladies and gentlemen.
Check Captain Dave Evans warns the cabin crew.
And I can remember overhearing him say it's going to be a very fast landing. And the stewardess's eyes bulged at that comment.
Hobby Tower, long easy 316 Delta Bravo, flight at 2.
Air traffic control clears Qantas Flight 32 for final approach. Richard de Crespigny holds the plane steady. At just 500 feet, the stall warning goes off. They're flying too slow, but it's too late to pull out.
So I pushed up the number 3 thrust lever and the stall warning went away.
Their speed, though, is still a problem.
I just kept saying to Larry, we're coming too fast, we're coming too fast.
As soon as we hit the ground, the plane just veered slightly to the right. And I thought, oh, this is not good.
Just didn't seem as if we were slowing down. We were just going such a high speed the whole time.
With the automatic brakes not working, de Crespigny resorts to brute force.
The auto brake system had malfunctioned, so he had his feet on the brakes, manually braking the aeroplane. As I said, brakes. Right. And he said, I am, and I said, no, get into it.
They finally come to a stop just 100 metres from the end of the runway.
There's an enormous sense of relief when it pulled up and we parked the brake.
Everybody just clapped. It was just sheer relief, even though, as I say, it was a bumpy landing, but it was just sheer relief.
All 469 lives are saved. But the question remaining now is, how did it happen? What caused such a monumental systems failure on the world's most advanced passenger aircraft? Has survived a near catastrophe. After losing most of its onboard computer systems, it's taken all the crew's skill and experience to get the A380 back on the ground safely. For the investigators, the biggest question is, why did the computer system fail so catastrophically? To find out, they focus on where the problems began, the explosion of number 2 engine.
It became clear fairly early on that there had been some sort of oil-related fire problem. We worked quickly to try and establish how this sort of sequence of events could happen.
They soon identify a crack in a tiny oil pipe.
There had been a fracture of an oil pipe that led to a spray of oil into one of the engine cavities.
The investigators now realise the oil caught fire, causing the engine's turbine disc to explode. This sent lethal debris hurtling through the wing faster than the speed of sound. Even this violent impact shouldn't have overwhelmed the A380's advanced control systems.
Systems are designed with backup against those sorts of instances.
But the explosion caused massive damage to the computer system itself. Slicing through crucial wiring and hydraulic lines, the computer couldn't cope. What saves the plane is the pilot's ability to cut through the system's confusion and focus on the controls that can still keep the plane flying. There's no doubt, automatic systems make today's planes safer and easier to fly. But Qantas Flight 32 shows that there is a limit to what systems can do. And when the system fails, the crew are on their own. Luckily, on the Qantas and United Airlines flights, there were extra hands on board to deal with it. The courage and experience of all of these pilots, the difference.
I think Al said it appropriately one time. He said that somebody must have been looking out for us, that we had survived.